Welcome, friends. Welcome. Good to see everybody. Appreciate the early birds here. We've got, let's see, Grace. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Glad to be here. Flavius Bocephus. Boy, you've already given me a bunch of questions to think about. Thank you so very much. Joshua S. Hello, hello. Thank you for all for being here. And I'm Dr. David Litwa, and I'm very excited to have all of you here. And I'm excited to have a bunch of other people showing up today. I've received a lot of excitement. Today, we're going to be looking at basically two Marcionite churches, and I'm just going to be opening their websites and more or less going through what they say and then giving you my kind of expert opinion on what the accuracy of what they're doing, basically. I'm not wanting to judge these people, but I am wanting to, uh, in the space of scholarship, to kind of provide a space where one could do really good scholarship online. And I think, I mean, personally, just to lay down my cards, I think Marcion there's a lot of truth to what he says. But what I notice online is that there's also a lot of inaccuracy with regard to Marcion as well. And so I suppose my goal here is just to say, here's what's out there, and here's what I can provide you in terms of, shall we say, fact checking, and hope in the hopes that you'll go deeper. And one of the ways to go deeper is to take my live Marcion course. And so I just want to welcome, thank you, Seek and Tune. Hello to you. I just want to welcome everybody. I've pinned a comment to the top of this, and I'm offering 25% off of my live course to all of you who have shown up for this live stream. And so I hope you'll take advantage of it. We start Monday. I know the times may not be perfect for everybody. It is an evening class. But what I want to do today is I want to show you some of the things that you'll get in that class. Pre-recorded, some of you, maybe many of you, have gotten my pre-recorded course on Marcion. And if you take the live course, you also instantly get the pre-recorded course. And so you can start going through that material. But one of the things that I think is really important for education is the live course experience. And I know for a fact that for myself, the way I teach things changes and evolves as I learn more and more new stuff. So the advantage of taking a live course from me is you get to see the latest. And the idea of the live course was to give you the preview of some of the research that's coming out this summer in my new book on Marcion. Appreciate all of you who have pre-ordered it. Flavius Bocephus, really appreciate that. That will be out this summer, right around July, hopefully. Maybe in honor of the time when Marcion supposedly came to Rome. But what I'm giving you in the live course is previews and snippets from that book. I mean, literally, I'll be giving you pieces of that book, and I'll be giving you the latest research. And it's really just a space where you can go a lot deeper than you would down the rabbit hole than you would be able to do with like a series of playlists and random information. Obviously, full acknowledgement, I'm coming at it from my own perspective. This is, my take on Marcion. I'm not, trying to control Marcion. I'm welcoming disagreement, and I don't care if you are a Marcionite yourself or you consider yourself just interested in Marcion historically, or you consider what he says dangerous, or what you consider what he says useful. What I want to give you is the most accurate portrayal kind of balanced portrayal, shall we say, that one can. And so that's the live course. I hope all of you will take a look at that and take advantage of that discount. Okay, Tim, great to have you. Appreciate it. Cheryl, so great to have you. Mark Anthony, I thought you killed yourself. Great to have you. How is Cleopatra? We've got again Flavius Bocephus. Really appreciate you being here. Um, all of you can put questions in the chat, and that's fine. But the way I want to organize this is I'm just going to share my screen, and we're going to go through the websites of the two major Marcionite churches, and we're just going to look at some of the things that they claim, and I'm going to comment on them. And as I'm going through, pop your questions in the chat. And although I can't guarantee that I get to absolutely everyone, I want to hear your thoughts because this is essentially interactive. Like I'm going to pick out the stuff that seems interesting, but you also should feel free to come in at any time and comment on the stuff that you see. That's the whole point of this. This is just meant to bring scholarship to you. So let me see if I can go ahead, and YouTube does allow me to um, share screens now, which is fantastic. So I'm going to see if I can. I'm going to see if I can open up the website here, and give me 1 second. So what we've got here is there's two Marcionite churches. One Marcionite church is just called the Marcionite Christian Church, and so they are at marcionitechurch.org, and their website is it's a little bit hokey, and they do try to put a little Greek up here, but it's not actually it's not actually good Greek. This should be Hena Evangelion, not Hena Evangelio. This should be Mia Pistis, not Mia Pisti, and this should be Henos Theos, not Henos Theos. But anyway, and E Proti Vivlos ought to mean something like the first book or the first Bible, but apparently one of the founders of this church is himself Greek, and so I think we're getting a little bit of modern Greek. But what we see in the initial banner here is one gospel, one faith, one God. Of course, that's what the Greek means. And they consider the Marcionite Church to be the largest pre-Nicene Christian denomination in the world. Founded at a particular date, 144, interestingly, using AD, by a Saint Marcion of Sinope. Now, Marcion, according to this church, actually did become a saint quite recently. I believe as recently as June of 2023. Well, how do you become a saint? Well, you know, basically, a person claiming to be a bishop stands up and consecrates you as a saint. I think that's pretty much all that happened. But that's lovely. I mean, of course, in traditional Christianity, they're just flipping the switch here. So Marcion goes from heretic to saint. They also claim that this church is the home of the world's oldest carved inscription bearing the name of Jesus. Now, it is true that there's an inscription dated to 318, which did belong to a Marcionite community. And I'm actually not sure that would be the oldest. In fact, I quite doubt that. But anyway, I think we would have older inscriptions referring to Jesus, but if anyone knows specifically, please feel free to chime in. So they start with the head. That is, they're a little bit heady, and so they go down to beliefs, starting with Galatians. I guess that's right for Marcion. They talk about God the Father, the arrival of Jesus, the Trinity, rites and sacraments, the gospel, and how to become, how to join. I find it interesting that they say Marcionites are not Gnostics. I kind of disagree about that. I think it's perfectly fine to be a Gnostic if that just means that you claim special knowledge, and I think that Marcion did. I also find it interesting that they want to be Trinitarians. I really don't understand the motivation for this because they're trying to say that they are pre Nicene. But of course, the Orthodox doctrine of the Trinity doesn't get hammered out until Nicaea itself. And then, if you know the story, they don't really agree to it. And they never really have, actually. But the point here being that that's a fourth century kind of a thing. So I'm just wondering why they want their church to be Trinitarian, even though they're claiming to be reviving the pre-Nicene gospel. We're going to talk a little bit more about what their gospel looks like. They publish it as the very first Bible, supposedly published in 144. They have holy days. Christmas and Easter should be familiar, but they have St. Marcion Day, which is July 15th. And what they're using there is Tertullian's dating for when Marcion comes to Rome. And actually, I find this to be genuinely inaccurate because Tertullian only says that there's a certain span of time between Marcion and Antoninus Pius. He doesn't say that there was a holiday that was celebrated when Marcion arrived at Rome. It's actually Adolf von Harnack that comes up with this idea of Marcion Day. And it's interesting to me that how much of what we see in these modern Marcionite movements, it depends on the reconstruction of Marcion by Adolf von Harnack. But anyway, you can learn about Saint Marcion. They've got YouTube videos here, and what you'll learn if you click on these YouTube videos is that this community is fairly anti-Jewish, and says some really, really harsh things about the God of whom I like to refer to as the Judean Lord, and it comes off as very, very anti-Jewish, and I'm not sure I would call it anti-Semitic, but it doesn't quite sit well, I think. They're dating, this is the traditional Harnack date for Marcion, 85 to 160. But what isn't Harnackian, and I can't figure out where exactly they get this from. They view Marcion himself as the collector of the original 10 epistles, and I haven't even seen any ancient source that actually says that. I think the modern consensus today is that a collection of Pauline epistles predated Marcion, and Marcion did not have to go around collecting those. I think in Marcion's day, people had a very good idea, or Christians, that is, had a very good idea of who Paul was, and they read his letters. And so they make it seem as if no one knew about Paul until Marcion gathered these letters. And I just don't think that's true. That not even ancient Marcionites say that Marcion himself gathered the letters. Of course, he was a great traveler. He was a shipmaster, which isn't the same thing as a shipbuilder, and it's not the same thing as a ship captain. But we do know that he's very well traveled. It's just that no ancient source says that he's the one who collected the letters. And then finally, we get a content guide. It's a bit primitive here, but going back up, we've got a tab with some basic information. And I just want to, I can't cover everything in the website, but I thought it would be interesting just to take a look at Marcion's life here. So they say that he's born in Sinope. And what's interesting about this tradition, even though you hear it from absolutely everybody, is really it's only Epiphanius who makes that point specific, that he's born specifically in Sinope. Earlier sources say that he's just from Pontus, which is a fairly large region south of the Black Coast. And they make him not an author, but a compiler of the first Christian Bible, which contains the gospel. And for them, the gospel is the revelation received by the Apostle Paul on the road to Damascus. I think that's kind of interesting because they don't accept the account of Acts, but it's only Acts that tells us that Paul was going to Damascus. So I'm not sure if they're aware of that contradiction there, but they are correct that Marcion did have original 10 epistles. I don't think they're correct that Marcion was the one who journeyed around and revisited all those churches. I just don't think that that's the case. And this would be, they say, in 144. The dating again is based on Tertullian. That dating is actually for Tertullian the time when Marcion comes to Rome. That's not necessarily the time where he publishes his edition. So I would be very kind of queasy about a hard and fast date. I don't know exactly where they're getting this 382 date for when the Roman Catholic Church prints its own Bible. Of course, we know that early Catholics had their own editions earlier than that. We've got 367, the first canon list from Athanasius. So I'm not sure why they would want to insist on 382. Did Marcion go through a Damnatio Memoriae issued by the Roman Emperor Constantine? No, he really didn't. I think, of course, in this council, Marcion wasn't the focus here in Nicaea, insofar as the council condemns heretics who don't believe in the creed. Then I guess Marcion might be included in that. But I don't, as I recall, Marcion is never, called up specifically at Nicaea. Could be wrong about that. And just skipping down here, the establishment of the church again to 144. I'm not sure that's quite accurate. Here they're quoting Tertullian, 115 years and 6.5 months between Christ and Marcion. Yes, that's what he says, and that's all that he says. He says nothing about a holiday. But they have made it a holiday, and as far as I can tell, this particular church doesn't have any buildings, but it does have a network of house churches. And you can get, if you don't want to be vaccinated, I think they take special pride in anti-vax ideology. So you can get an exemption from them. Just say that you're a Marcionite. So that let me pause there, and I can't see the chat when I share the screen. So let me let me go back to the chat and just see what's going on. Okay, thank you so much, the least high. I appreciate the super chat. Really appreciate that, or the super sticker. I don't even know the lingo. Really appreciate that. Are there any comments particularly on? Are there any comments particularly on so far on what we've seen from the website? Anything that strike you as something you want to go further? Feel free to put that in the chat itself, and we can talk about that. I want to briefly turn also to the other Marcionite church. And when I started this, I thought that I thought that there would be only one, but there are actually two Marcionite churches, and they are in competition, and meaning that they don't seem to like each other, which is interesting. I mean, I don't think either of them is very large, but they haven't teamed up or anything, and they appear to be in competition. So let me show you this other website, which again is the Marcionite Church of Christ, which is a different thing. They make some of the same claims, but some of it is different. So again, they claim to have the first Christian Holy Bible, but they call their version the Testamentum. And they also, their canon is a bit larger. They reconstruct a hymn book, which is from the Odes of Solomon, and they introduce you to that New Testament. It's a bit more of a kind of a newer, kind of flashy website, but they've got your quotation from Galatians. They've got the same claim that they're not Gnostics, because they don't want to say that they have secret knowledge. I don't see why it's so bad to have secret knowledge. I mean, even the early Catholics have secret knowledge, but um, they are also Trinitarian. And again, I don't know why, because I don't think Marcion is Trinitarian. I think he's long ahead of that bandwagon. They claim to represent pre-Nicene Christianity, so that's pretty much exactly the same claim as the other Marcionite church. And um, the Evangelicon is I guess, it's usually called the Evangelion, but I guess they want to make it into an adjective. And then they tell you a little bit about the Council of Nicaea. And again, they seem to be copying, or someone seems to be copying from the other one, because they basically have the same kind of version of church history, except in this version, Marcion doesn't publish in 144. He publishes a bit earlier in 128. And I don't know where they get that particular date. Again, it's Harnack who says that Marcion has a pre-Roman ministry. So maybe they are somehow dependent on Harnack for that date. I don't actually know what they're depending on. And they've got a way to join. I mean, heck, their website is a lot better than mine. But then they have these lots of these helpful questions. And so if we just look at one of these, again, we can kind of see what the claims are being made. And the claims here I find are really interesting. So ship owner, yeah, that's probably pretty accurate. Again, they want him from Sinope, which is Epiphanius only saying that. Um, Also, they basically take over Epiphanius. Epiphanius is the only ancient witness who, is like 200 years after Marcion, who says that Marcion's dad was a bishop. But this church goes even beyond Epiphanius in saying that bishop was a guy named Philologus. Now, here's where we get into some real contradictions here, because Philologus appears in Romans 16, verse 15. And in late antiquity, there was a tradition developed that Philologus was one of the 70 disciples. But that's Orthodox mythologizing, right? And one of the irony here is that in Marcion's actual canon, Romans 16 didn't exist. So Philologus was not in Marcion's Bible. So here, whether or not they're aware of it or not, they're depending on later Orthodox myth to fill in the blanks for Marcion's life, which I think is really problematic. And I wish, I wish they would be a little bit more careful here. Polycarp comments on Marcion as early as 115. That's a pretty early date for Polycarp's letter. First of all, it's not clear that Polycarp is commenting on Marcion, but his letter to the Philippians is usually dated about 135 or 140. I'm not sure how they have an exact date for Marcion's death. I have no idea how they get 154. I have no idea how they get him being exactly 85. But I can tell you that this is an absolute lie that he dies as a martyr in the Colosseum. I mean, no one says that, no ancient source. So I do not know where that particular point comes from. I mean, it's a complete mystery to me. But they make the same claim as the other Marcionite church, the Marcionite Christian Church, that Marcion collected Paul's epistles, and that he, published the antitheses, and that he thought that the Yahweh was evil. And in the 130s, so they date this earlier, he travels to Rome, makes the donation. That's all from Tertullian. and then is denounced as a heretic and excommunicated in 144. So this is an important difference, um, that is different from the other Marcionite church. So whereas the other Marcionite church, the Marcionite Church of Christ, says that Marcion came to Rome on July 15th, 144, this Marcionite church says that that date commemorates his excommunication. And as I point out in the forthcoming book, I think it's really unhelpful to say that Marcion was excommunicated, because it gives you this image of like the early of early Catholics as a really well organized, well oiled institution, and that's just not the case. I don't think anyone in 144 had any power to excommunicate anyone. I don't think the authority structure was even set up for anything like that. This is something like that happens in the medieval period, like Luther is excommunicated by the Pope, but they just didn't have the actual institutional structures to issue anything like a formal excommunication. So, we could go through any one of these questions, but let me get back to the chat and see if anyone wants to comment on anything particularly. So I'm going to go back up. I know, Flavius, you've asked a bunch of questions here. And I can get to these. Let me just read them. Is there a relationship between stories about Paul's life and Marcion's life? If so, is that coincidental or part of the literary program? I wouldn't say there's that like much evidence for like a very strong relationship between Paul's life and Marcion's life. I mean, apart from the obvious fact that they travel around the Mediterranean and that they believe in Christ as a God. I'm not sure what exactly you're thinking of there. Your first question is blocked. I don't know. It's blocked on my screen. I don't know if you can write that one again, but really appreciate you getting the new Marcionite book. Do you feel like the tide is turning in New Testament scholarship and Marcion is starting to get more attention overall? Well, I think it's kind of same old, same old. So the evangelical and conservative wing, they just want to ignore him, and they will continue to ignore him. But I think, I've been pleased that in conversations with Mark Goodacre, a few months ago, that it's at least Marcion is at least on his radar, even though, of course, his bread and butter is just the canonical Gospels. But I do think that he is coming into consciousness a little bit more, which is great to see. So let's see. So Kang, I'm with Marcion. We need to throw the tour in the trash. Okay. Manny, good to see you. Manny is part of the course and is going to be part of the live course. And as I mentioned at the beginning, so I've pinned to the top of the chat a discount for everyone who wants to join the live course. I'm giving a full 25% off. I hope you'll all take advantage of that. It's exclusively available to you guys and to those who have taken the pre-recorded Marcion course. But as I hope to show you today, there's a lot more that you can get from actual live interaction than from pre-recordings. Pedro, great to have you. Really appreciate you coming along. Logos, thank you. Thank you for reading The Evil Creator. Where do you date the Gospels and the Nag Hammadi treatises approximately? Well, Nag Hammadi has 50 different texts. So, but, if you think of things like Gospel of Mary and Gospel of Truth, I think all of that is contemporary with the final forms of the Gospels that made it into the canon. So I'm very happy to see those as basically contemporaneous, if that's what you're asking. It's a common conservative strategy to kind of like try to move the Nag Hammadi material as late as possible, in order so that they can safely ignore it and say that it's not relevant for the New Testament. But as far as I'm concerned, those early texts like Gospel of Truth could well be earlier than the final form of the Gospel of John. Obviously, Marcion's Gospel, I do think, is earlier than canonical Luke. And in the live course, we'll be going through systematically, why I think that's the case and how one could make a pretty good argument. Rudy, thanks so much for the super sticker there. Appreciate it. Let's see. So, Beats by Gyro. So, everyone ashamed of the word Gnostic trying to attack right wing crowd on Twitter. Yeah, I think I wear Gnostic as a badge of honor. I think Gnostic is a cool word. I think everyone should be Gnostic, to be honest. Mark Antony Vincent implies that the gospel and the letters are the same style. Is that your view? Well, so Vincent actually takes up the view of some early church fathers that Marcion is the compiler of the gospel and is the writer of it. So I don't accept that particular view, and I'll show you why in the live course. Um, I I think when arguing about same style, I would be very cautious about that as well. And I'm not sure what the end goal of saying that would be, apart from viewing Marcion as a kind of editor who's making these documents seem the same, or seem like coherent. I don't think Marcion was an author, and I don't think Marcion was an editor either. So, and again, in the live course, I'll tell you why. Okay, so how old are these churches, the Marcionite churches? That's a great question. Um, I don't think that they're any more than a few years old, to be honest. I think these are very very new movements, but I don't know the actual date. Um, Frater, where are these churches based? Great question. So the Marcionite Church of Christ says that it's based in Greece, that it has a Greek bishop who has sanctified or hallowed Marcion, made him into a saint. But I don't think that's where they say that they're located. They're located in the ether, and I think they might call something a church building, but I think in terms of Marcionite parishioners, they're all just people on the internet. Um, Oh yes, Flavius. Yeah, Nina Livesey's, or does she pronounce it Livesey's new book about Paul's letters, all being second century forgeries. Yeah, so I've got a review copy of this book that's coming to me. I have to digest this material myself, and so I'll be revealing that. Be revealing my thoughts on Patreon. So just stick with me on Patreon. And I'll present a full book review of that book on my blog, The Gnostic Archive, in the next few weeks. So I think it's fascinating. And the great thing about Nina is she's just a really good scholar. Like a lot of the field of people studying Marcion, it's kind of like dominated by white men. A lot of them, European, and it's great to see Nina come into this space, and I think that she's got a very, very scholarly approach. And obviously, she's chosen a publisher with peer review, and so she's crossed all her T's and dotted her I's. And so I'm really excited to see what she comes up with. I think, as a general kind of a point, it is true that the epistles that Marcion had, it was just an earlier edition. And so the epistles that we have now of Paul are the Catholic edition. And so one of the major differences, that's most obvious on paper is, Marcion's edition didn't have Romans 15 and 16. So, I mean, they just didn't exist. So when we think about like the idea of editing Paul and re-editing Paul for the Catholic edition, we're not just talking about adding the Catholic Paul of the pastorals. We're talking about someone who systematically went through those epistles and changed them, maybe combined different stuff and made up different stuff. And so the New Testament Paul that you buy in your Christian bookstore, that's the Catholic version of Paul. So I could say that Paul is a Catholic fiction. And where I think that Marcion is helpful, perhaps for Nina, is to say, well, do we get any closer to the historical Paul by paying attention to Marcion. And to be honest, I don't have her book yet, so I don't actually know how much she engages with Marcion. So stay tuned for that. Do I think any of the canonical gospels portrayed Jesus as deceitful or deceptive? Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think the point of the canonical gospels, which are the Catholic gospels, the Catholic revised gospels, early Catholic revised gospels, is to root out that negative imagery of Jesus. But yeah, perhaps. I mean, again, that would be, I think, a matter of interpretation. Like famous scenes where Jesus is telling Judas, what you do quickly, and um, kind of like pushing him into betraying him. And even though he's saying things like, it's better for you never to have been born. I mean, it's a little bit weird. This whole issue of Jesus referring to a woman of Phoenicia as a little dog. I mean, they haven't cleaned up everything, but I'm not sure on the deceitful. If you have a specific passage, let me know. Um, Fraud, I really appreciated the gift of memberships. Yeah, so the memberships on YouTube. This is something new to me. Like I was talking to Rudy the other day. Like I'm just trying to make a living here, and so I've set up memberships. I hope people will take them because it just allows me to reveal more content. I've got maybe like 3 or 4 dozen videos which I have not publicly released, but which I will release for members. So if you're a super fan, um, well, go for it. There'll be more to come. And thanks to all for taking those up. I'm gonna try to get through these questions, but one of the things that I wanted to do before I got through everything here is I wanted to say a little bit more about the particular editions of the gospel that the Marcionite churches publish, because I think this is really interesting. Um, as you know, there's been a lot of work recently on getting the right reconstruction of Marcion's gospel text and Marcion's text of the epistles. And that's all quite new. And I would say that if you're reading a reconstruction prior to 1996, that's very, very, very wrong. Um, and you should definitely not depend on things, really old editions like Harnack and Hahn and Zahn and those great Germans of the 19th century. And the reason why you should never ever ever kind of depend on those older editions, which unfortunately they're the free ones online, right? Like, and these English translations of them um, by James Hamlin Hill in the 1890s. He basically translates Hahn. The problem with these very old editions, it's sort of like reading the Ante-Nicene Fathers online, but it's even worse because the way that older scholars reconstructed Marcion's gospel is they let theology be their guide. So they believed the heresiologists about Marcion's theology, and they believed that the heresiologist that Marcion was an editor and he took out stuff that didn't belong to his theology. So, in other words, they already had a heresiological theory about how Marcion came up with his Bible, and then they went through the text of Luke, and they kind of said things like, "Huh, does this agree with Marcion's theology? No, so we can take it out." So obviously that's problematic, and if they're doing that, that's very problematic because it's subjective. It's based on lies about Marcion. if you've ever read Jason Badun's, you know, translation, he's got, I think, still the best English translation. It needs to be updated. He himself acknowledges that, but it's still the best in English. Obviously, if you read Greek, you can get his newer edition. But I think one of the things that you see with Badun is, because he's so rigorous in just making sure not to take out anything that, you know, is based on theology, that we see that Marcion's theology is actually quite different than what the heresiologists portray it as. And so if you were to download this very first Bible, what you would see, and it is free, what you would see is basically a conglomeration of some 19th century translations of Marcion's gospel based on these very old reconstructions. And it's funny, I read this text, you know, from cover to cover, and there's not a single word in this book about how they came up with their text. And that's really unfortunate. And I actually emailed their staff and I was like, how did you derive this text? Because this is like your central document. This is what you boast about. You know, this is like your crown jewel. This is the very first Bible. How did you come up with it? And he's like, I don't know. I'll have to ask the bishop, which, you know, I had to laugh at myself because that's a very Catholic, you know, thing to say, you know, don't ask me theology questions, just ask the bishop. But I think that's also very dangerous because from what I can tell, this very first Bible is just pieced together from 19th century reconstructions, which are all very, very, very flawed. Now, I think in the case of the Testamentum, um, that which is the Marcionite Church of Christ, that they have actually used Badun to help them out. But their translation of the very first Bible is even more flawed because it basically takes things from John, and I don't even know why they would want to do that. But that's what they do. But both versions have, I think, are contaminated versions that depend for the reconstruction on canonical Luke, and I think that's a really serious mistake. We don't want to depend on the Catholic edition to reconstruct the Marcionite edition. That's actually the opposite of what we want to do. We want to ignore that Catholic edition and not let that influence our decisions. So that's what I would say about that. And this is so important. I can't go through the details here, but again, if you take the live course, we're going to go through some of those details so that, you know, you'll be able to understand why it is when someone says, "Oh, I've got this reconstruction," you know, and it's even scientific. Why it is, looking at their principles, there could still be flaws in that. And even if you don't think they're flaws, it's still important to see that there are very different theories and principles of reconstruction that go into this. That this is part of the humanities. It's actually not a science, and it's even if someone says that it's scientific, but is then using reconstructions from like the 19th century, that obviously is problematic because that's like contaminating all the data with bad data. Um, so we're going to go through all this and step by step in the live course. So again, I hope all of you will consider joining me. It's an evening course. It's going to be Mondays and Thursday nights. We're going to start this Monday. So come along. I'm offering a 25% discount, and you know, I'll also offer you money back guarantee. I mean, I don't care. I want to see as many people as possible in the course. If you don't like it, I'll give you everything back. Don't worry. I don't I don't really care. I just want to spread the knowledge. So all right, let's get back to the chat here. And I'll see if I can pick up where I left off. Again, apologies if I can't quite get to everyone. I just want to really there's almost 60 people here. I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming. Um, Esoteric philosopher, did Marcion really believe the material world is evil, or is that an oversimplification? Yes, that's an oversimplification. Yep. One of the arguments that I make in the book is that Marcion's God is also a creator. This is something that Harnack tried to suppress, but I think that creation itself is not bad for Marcion. There's a lot of things that Tertullian says that are just kind of like rhetoric, like Marcion wanted to throw up when he thought about the process of birth. And it is messy and bloody, but actually it seems to be Tertullian who has a problem with it, not Marcion. And we'll talk about that in the course. Okay, so and I see Kang, you might disagree with that. That's okay. There's certainly evil in the world, but matter itself is that evil. I'm not sure that Marcion really cared much about that question. But if he did, I don't think he would say that. Corby just finished the Simon of Samaria course. Excellent, well done. You're going from first Gnostic to the height of the heretics. Well, by the way, if any of you finish a course, like I don't get notified when people finish a course on Thrivecart. So if you just email me and say, I finished this course, I'll send you a certificate. I'm very happy to do that. I think that kind of like motivates people to take the next course. Obviously, I in the long term, I might be able to get some official accreditation, but I'm happy to send anyone who finishes the course a certificate. And of course, for any of those who finish, please give feedback. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I'm wanting to improve these courses. And one of the chief ways that I'm doing that is by teaching the live courses. So by teaching the live courses, I can then go back and improve the recorded versions. So how does Simon's version of the creator or lesser God differ from that of Marcion's idea of Yahweh? Well, so if you accept my version of Simon, which is the Simon of the Great Declaration, he doesn't have a negative lower creator. He has a wisdom figure, which she's called the seventh power, and there's nothing bad about her. In fact, it's very Jewish in the sense that it's wisdom who creates the world, and that wisdom, called the seventh power, is embodied or embedded in us and comes to fruition in us, grows as a fruit or flower within us, in our own human intelligence. And God grows in us, basically, and then God redeems God's self through human consciousness collectively. So there's nothing like an evil creator for Simon. Irenaeus later says that Simon believed in these evil angels who made the world. I don't see any evidence of that whatsoever. So I'm just giving Irenaeus the boot there. I don't think that's what Simonian said. So about how Gnostic is the language of the Gospel of John? Well, any language is Gnostic, depending on how you use it, right? Because meaning isn't embedded in an individual word; it's embedded in how those words are connected. So Gnostic for me means anything having to do with transcendent knowledge. So in a sense, it's above language, but of course we use language as signs and symbols to get to those Gnostic truths. But it's not an individual word that's Gnostic. It's how those words are put together. And any combination of words, can be put together in a Gnostic way. Brett, on the topic of Jesus, do what you will, do quickly. Why would Judas accept the morsel of dipped bread? Yeah, it looks like a stage trick. And as I said on the previous live stream, it looks like they're in cahoots, which gives rise to theories that we see in the Gospel of Judas and in Nikos Kazantzakis' Last Temptation of Christ, that Jesus and Judas are like the real tricksters there, that they're in cahoots working together. So why would he have agreed? Well, he would have agreed, because he knew he had some secret backdoor deal with Jesus. Whatever it was, it's something that we would have to reimagine, refictionalize. But Um, the Gospels are great, and they work exactly like classical mythology, where in a myth or an ancient story, there's lots of little, shall we say, unresolved threads that later authors can then come in and try to, take the fiction in a new direction. And this is a key example of that. Um, okay. So when will the audiobooks of your newest be available? Yeah. So this is something that I recently put on Patreon. I'm looking for people to actually help me record those. And I've got some success there. But yeah, I've released a trilogy of books, which is Simon Magus question mark and Vesalides and Valentinus. All of those I need to get on Audible. Actually, Frauder has done an amazing thing by volunteering to do the Hermetica volume. So Hermetica 1 will soon appear on Audible. Thanks to Frauder RC. Everyone give him a shout out. He's done an amazing job. And so you'll be seeing that soon. Just keep your eyes on Peeled on Patreon. Okay. Appreciate the plug there, Frauder. Okay. He's in the Gnosis Academy. Yeah. So what is the Gnosis Academy? People keep asking me this, that it's just a way that eventually you'll just get all the courses. So if you look at my website, I've got a dozen pre-recorded courses. And so the Gnosis Academy is a way for you to, first of all, get the newest released courses. And it's a way for you to compile all those courses together, because every 60 days, a new course is added to the Gnosis Academy subscription. And I make that decision, based on, what people are buying, what people are interested in the Gnosis Academy itself. But yeah, eventually, so if you want access to all the courses, like the full suite, join the Gnosis Academy, and then you'll get that special hangout with me, where it's a much more intimate setting where we can kind of get to know each other and actually start a relationship. This is great. I love this, but it's not quite as close as I conceive of the academic experience. And what I'm trying to do, along with people like Justin Sledge, along with people like Andrew Henry, is give more of an academic scholarly experience rather than just like flashy clickbait and eye bombs and trying to draw you in just to watch. Honestly, I don't care if 100,000 people watch my videos. If I had 10 people who really watched them and commented and learned and shared and gained some insight, that would be enough. Like I don't depend on YouTube. I depend on the courses, and I depend on Patreon, of course. So I'm not designing the videos to get 100,000 views. Of course, that would be nice, and please share them. But the point is to present real scholarly information, and so that you can actually, you don't have to go through like another endless session of scrolling to find little tidbits that could be inaccurate. So I'm using YouTube to put my PhD to work, right? Okay, so like I'm one of those people who's really trying to give you that academic scholarly experience that I hope would pass peer review on any peer review. So that's the goal. Whether or not I can survive in this mode, I don't know, but that's what I'm doing. And so I appreciate everyone who has come to support. It really helps. So let me just see. So Frauder, have to ask the bishop. Yeah. And let me see. Do we know Yesterday's Obsession? I'm trying to get to people whom I haven't gotten to yet. Yesterday's Obsession. Do we know if Marcion had any mentor predecessor? Well, the heresiologists say that he had Cerdo as a mentor, but as I'll point out in the live course, that all that is kind of like what they're reconstructing by inference. And when we look into heresiology, this is one of like the things that you need to watch out for, like how heresiologists connect the dots and put the puzzle pieces together. One of the things that, and I wish that these Marcionite churches the best, but one of the things that I think is really problematic when you look at their websites is they've made Marcion a saint, which is fine, but they're depending on, first of all, 19th century reconstructions of Marcion, early 20th century reconstructions from Marcion, like Harnack. And Harnack himself is depending on the heresiological tradition. And so if you're going to build your biography of Marcion from Epiphanius, who's, Marcion's worst enemy, and you're just going to pick and choose elements from that biography, it's like you're drinking from a sewer. I mean, it really is like, it's no good. I mean, I know that people fear like, oh, well, maybe we don't know enough, and we fear the gaps in our knowledge. But honestly, I'd rather have gaps than inaccuracies. I mean, I don't know. Am I crazy? Is that just a scholarly thing? I don't know why someone would want to believe inaccurate things about Marcion. And I don't know why someone wouldn't ask, what's the actual source for that? Like, for me, that's so basic to what scholarship does. But I don't know. The Marcionites themselves, they're not asking where we're getting this as a source, and I didn't even know if you told them, whether that would really strike them as problematic. But this whole idea of Marcion's dad being a guy named Philologus, who was bishop of Sinope, all that is complete fiction. I mean, it's complete 4th century fiction and later. And then even later, they say that Philologus was one of the 70. Like, that is like fiction built upon fiction. Like, why do you want to be spreading that information if you want to be going back to pre-Nicene Christianity? It absolutely, like, for me, it just doesn't compute. Anyway, okay, Frater, The Last Temptation of Christ converted you back in 99. Okay. Yeah, I recommend reading all of Kazantzakis' novels. Yeah. Zorba the Greek, anything you can get your hands on. He's a very Dionysian author. All right. Now we're coming close to the end here, and I know there's a couple other questions here, and I can see that there's a lot of interest in, let's see, Judas and a couple other things of Trogo in the Eucharist of John. Yeah, these are really interesting questions, and I want to say, first of all, that I might not be able to get to everything, but I want to say thank you to everyone who was able to come. And as I said in one of my posts this week on Patreon, I'm not myself a Marcionite, but I think that he has a lot of truth to give us. But we can't get the truth from Marcion if it's mixed and rolled with so much error. And unfortunately, the internet is basically like, some of it has been purified, but a lot of it is, I hate to say it, a bubbling sewer, or stuff where you can get a lot of contamination. And so if you're really serious about your education, don't make yourself a victim of, a random YouTube search or a playlist or a series of videos on Marcion. Try to go deeper. Try to get that gnosis, right? I think in the end, if you're just after information, you're just going to tire out your eyeballs. There's a ton of information online, but it's not gnosis. And so the goal of my business is to give you that deeper knowledge. Obviously, I don't make any claim that I can give you a transcendent, knowledge of, the true God or anything like that. But I think what I can give you is a Gnostic-like experience, but Gnostic in the sense that I'm giving you what a scholar would give you in real office hours in a real seminar. And so I hope that each and every one of you will seriously consider joining the live course. Obviously, you're welcome to take just the pre-recorded Marcion course. Totally fine. I've got tons and tons of sources there. Honestly, you'll spend, you could spend 6 months going through that course just slowly. As I said before, if you finish a course, let me know. I'll send you a certificate. I'll be sending a very special certificate to everyone who joins me in the live course. And I just want to give a shout out to those who have already joined. Rudy, Manny, really appreciate it. I'll be sending out the first reading soon. So I'm closing the doors of enrollment very soon. So if you want to join the Marcion live course, if you want to get that actual live experience, do so. You can grab 25% off. I've got the link up on top, pinned on top. So there you have it. And I personally hope that you'll all be able to go, check out, if you want to check out these Marcionite churches, if you want to download their text, that's fine. But what I recommend is getting the best of scholarly information. So, learn Greek. If you don't have time to learn Greek, go get Badun's First New Testament and get the latest scholarship on Marcion. Again, I've been researching Marcion now for 2 years, intensively, and I want to share the insights that I've gained with all of you. So I'm hopeful that all of you will come and take those courses. And that's my gift to you. Thank you for being a gift to me today. Thank you for being here, and I hope to see all of you in the next live stream and anywhere, Patreon, anywhere in the ether. All of you, take care, stay safe, keep away from the archons, and I hope that you find gnosis.